Online for Authors. I'm chatting with Reenita M Hora, author of Vermilion Harvest. Welcome, Reenita.
Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It is such a pleasure. I'm so excited to talk with you about Vermilion Harvest.
I am super excited to have you. It was a good book. It was a gripping book. I enjoyed every moment. But before we really dive into all of the ins and outs of the book, can you give the listeners just a quick idea of what they're going to get when they open up these pages?
Oh my gosh, I would love to turn that question right around and ask you. The one thing that I've noticed is that readers outside of India do not know about this massacre.
Absolutely.
They do not know that this took place in relatively recent Indian history. Okay, 100 plus years ago, just over 100 years ago. But, this is sort of the universal comment that I come across. So definitely when they open this up, they are going to be treated with a love story, but it is set against a very fraught time in India's modern political history and takes place against the backdrop of the days, 20 odd, 1 month to 3 months, but really 10 days or so, leading up to and including this massacre on April 13th, 1919, that really spurred India's independence movement. India did not become independent until years later, 1947. But this is, the single incident that really made it happen. So love story set against this political disaster. To me, it's Romeo and Juliet or Titanic meets Gandhi.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you, why did you choose historical fiction? And then why did you choose this time period in India as your backdrop?
So I'd never written historical fiction before, and I knew it was something, a genre that I did want to develop a book in, and one or more, and it's definitely gone to more since then. This particular incident in history is something that I have been obsessed with, I want to say, most of my life. That is the honest truth. Because I grew up in India, we all did, sort of reading about this in our school history textbooks, which gave this, the span of 2 paragraphs, maybe 3. I mean, that's it. Considering that it is, as I mentioned, the single incident that spurred our independence movement, why do we not know more about it? And it was pretty sordid. It was pretty gritty. When I think back to my days as a teenager, when I was in the 11th grade in school, I was in a play that was also set against, the story of this massacre. And that's, I think, when I first sort of actively fell in love with what was happening in Punjab at the time. I'm from Punjab. My mother's family hails from Amritsar. My grandfather, my mother's father, actually was a boy, a young man, a boy, actually, when he passed by the entrance of Jallianwala Bagh days after the massacre and saw a visual that sort of gripped him for life, this stack of slippers piled up at the entrance. It's something that I actually refer to in the book. And India, being a country where footwear was a privilege, certainly in 1919, they had stacked up the footwear of the dead to redistribute. And this was a story that carried down, through the family. It just struck me, struck all of us. And when I was in the 11th grade also, I was very into books, but I was not into the romance genre. I just kind of looked down on it, And I had a friend who said, listen, bear with me. I know you don't like this genre, but there's one book that I want you to read, and it's called Love Story by Eric Segal. And I remember saying to her, I said, how could you even think that I would deign to pick up a book whose title is Love Story? Right. And she was like, because this one you're going to fall in love with. Forget the others. And she was spot on. To me, Love Story was an epic love story. And then years later, I saw the film by Arthur Hiller. And I just fell in love with the idea of a love story, the pathos, and later on, when I did become a writer, the fact that they did not fit into the romance category.
Right. Right, exactly. Because this book, though it has a romance element, it certainly does not fit your romance.
Correct.
It just doesn't fit. So this is what I would tell people is more of a love story. It has the love story element versus an actual romance to it. Was the research difficult? I mean, you said that you were able to get, 2 paragraphs in school, and I'm just curious, how difficult was it to find the facts? Because you have it, there are a lot of good facts in this. As everyone who has read it has told you, I knew nothing about this. Zero. I had no idea that this massacre had happened. And so I was very absorbed in these details and wanted to know more. And I love finding historical fiction books that give me history of things that I've not learned.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the United States, I don't know why we don't learn that, but and part of it is I don't think that what I consider recent history, 1900s, 2000s, we just don't get it. They focus a lot on really ancient, and then they focus a lot on the beginning of the United States, and we just don't really get much else.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more, Terry. And when I went into this, I didn't, truth be told, know exactly what I was doing or what the rules were, if there were any, of historical fiction or historical romance or love stories. In some way, shape, or form, this idea or the idea of this book has been developing in my head for some 30 years. In my 20s, I wrote a version, a very, very early and very rudimentary and very bad version of this.
The first versions are often that, so that's okay.
But I wrote it as a screenplay, and I didn't know how to rate screenplays then, either. Sort of imagining what the world would be like. And I sort of put it aside. It was just not good enough. It was very clear, even to me at the time, and thought about it sort of for 20 years, 25-ish years. And around 2019, which is the 100th year anniversary of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, so actually in 2018, it occurred to me that, oh my gosh, next year is the 100th anniversary. What am I doing? I should have written that book by now. And that's when I started to actively do the research and actively sit down to write the book. There was a lot of nonfiction that had been released right around then, leading up to the 100th anniversary. There was a biography about General Dyer and, a few other sort of political nonfiction sort of history books. But I went straight into the court trial of General Dyer because I wanted to sort of understand the psyche of this man, what he must have been thinking. And then I discovered that the court trial is actually very, very detailed, pulls in a lot of other figures, really paints a picture of what's happening in the city at the time, the events leading up to the main massacre, the things that happened afterwards. So it was a lot of information and a great place to get started. And then I sort of got lost in Amritsar 1919,
That's what happens when you're doing historical fiction.
Yeah.
It's so easy to start diving down these rabbit holes and you get caught in all of the research. And it could be very easy to fail to write because
Correct.
You're so involved in the research. And so at some point, at least for me, I have to say, I'm done researching right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to write my story. And then maybe I can go back and do a little more research to fill in some spaces that I can tell I need a little more information. But otherwise, I could research forever.
Correct. I mean, it's, you're absolutely right. I mean, this, book has led me down the rabbit hole for another book that I'm researching now. And my delight is spending time in the UC Berkeley library, sort of digging through archive upon archive upon archive, because you can't take them out and nothing is digitized.
Right.
And, my husband, I sort of disappeared for 3.5 weeks. He's like, where are you? I mean, what are you doing? I'm like,
Research.
it's more exciting in this library.
I get it. One of the things that I believe was said in the book, or potentially it was something I read in one of your maybe bio or something, was that General Dyer, so he's the man that's kind of behind the massacre, and he was eventually found kind of guilty and dismissed from service, yet in some circles he is seen more as a hero instead of a criminal. So let's talk a little bit about what you found out about that, because I found that to be very interesting as well.
Oh, it is such a point of conflict, even today, even at this moment, because he was dismissed, as you rightly say, from service, but he went back to England being proclaimed as a hero and a savior of the British Empire. And in India, he's known as the butcher of Amritsar.
Right.
And I think he was even awarded laurels or honors or, something of the sort back in England. And this is, you raise a larger question about the colony, what the crown, i.e. the kings, queens of England, Queen of England at the time, but let's say the royalty, what they deem to be correct or incorrect, justice or injustice, in the face of their position in the world. And in 2019, in fact, there was an appeal to UK Parliament that was spearheaded by the Indian community in the UK to extract an apology from the Queen of England. She was still alive at the time, for this massacre that didn't go anywhere. And there was a movie that came out in India very, very recently, a Hindi movie, a Bollywood, Kesari 2, which also focuses on this massacre. And the movie maker Karan Johar also remarks about how General Dyer's granddaughter, even today, justifies his actions.
I think a lot of times when we read history, you have to remember that what we read is based on where the source is from.
Yeah.
And so people in England, given that they believed that what they had was a colony that they could do anything they wanted with, and that was just an extension of England, and therefore the people who lived in India were under English control and had no rights whatsoever if they didn't want them to. They can believe what they want, and yet from the Indian perspective, as you're sitting there saying, now wait a minute, he came in and he massacred innocent, very innocent people who were doing nothing but celebrating a holiday.
Exactly. It was a terrorist attack.
Yes.
Essentially, it was a terrorist attack. The official figures put casualty numbers at something like 379, but unofficially, they say that, casualties were up to 2,000. Now, how much of this, we'll never know exactly what the truth is.
Right.
But if you think about the fact that there were 3,000 people who were killed in 9/11,
right,
100 years later, in that kind of planned, organized terrorist attack, it really begs the question as to, the justice of the whole thing.
Absolutely. No. And that was something that I think was part of what I found horrific, was in addition to the fact that it was a horrible act.
Yeah.
The after effects were kind of like, well, we were just doing what we do.
Correct.
And I think I just never really understood, which is crazy because the United States also started out as a colony. And I know what they did here, but why my mind didn't say, well, they probably did it elsewhere as well is just crazy. So, yeah. You wrote about very difficult topics. Okay, so not only did you write about this massacre, which was very difficult, but you wrote about tension between three different religions in India at the time. You wrote about a love interest in which it was two different religions, which is a very, and pretty much a no-no. I mean, it was something that shouldn't be happening. You wrote about the British occupation. You wrote about Anglo-Indians and where they actually fit into the society, because here you've had the British there for so long who sometimes intermarried and now they have children, and where do those children belong?
Right.
You talked about single motherhood. You talked about rape, and on and on and on. Why tackle these big social issues? What made you say, not only am I going to write a love story and set it against this thing, but I'm going to hit people? What was in your mind when you did that?
Oh my gosh. We don't tackle these issues.
No, we don't.
We just don't. Maybe anywhere in the world we don't. In India, we certainly don't. And, as I think about the times then, the issues that have existed over the course of years, the issues that exist today, I ask myself and the ether repeatedly, what is it that we've learned? Have we learned anything at all these last 100 years?
Not much.
Exactly. And the biases that exist today. I mean, here I am sitting in America talking to you, Terry. This is the land of multiracial, interracial relationships, marriages, melting pot. I mean, this is what defines society here, right? In India, till today, it's still a taboo. The thought of my son or my daughter marrying somebody from another community, although it is more accepted, perhaps in urban India, at this moment, relative to, 10 years, 15 years ago, it's still not accepted. There is still hatred or conflict or certainly disapproval. It was interesting, the idea of the Anglo-Indians, you just mentioned, this is a community that really has had no place in society, because neither were they Indian, neither were they British. Okay, they were always the outsiders. They were always the outcasts. I grew up in a family where Anglo-Indians and the thought of them just evoked such distaste. I can see sort of my ancestors, and I can see their faces.
Right.
As they utter this word, even as I talk with you. And what I thought was really, really interesting is that I have a friend who is, she's Anglo-Indian because, her grandmother, I think, was British. And she said to me when my book came out, this is a friend, so it's not even a different kind of reader, but she said to me, she's like, oh, you've written a book about Anglo-Indians, but Anglo-Indians, I want to be really clear, Reenita, those are the people, who had these relations with those British officers at the time of the colony. That was not me. That's not us. Because my grandfather went abroad to England to study, and he met my grandmother and they fell in love. So I'm not Anglo-Indian. And I thought, wow,
it's still a taboo. It's still an issue. That's something that I like when I'm writing. I like historical fiction, and I've written a few historical fiction novels. And when I write them, I love to pull at societal issues that are still going on today, but we can talk about them in the past. Yes. And when we're talking about them in the past, it doesn't scare people quite as much. You can look at that, and they can develop their own little things. And I also think that when you're reading, you can talk about things, like racism and xenophobia and things in a way that doesn't get people yelling at one another. I think you and I could have this conversation, but there are a lot of times you try to have a conversation that includes like the word racist, and immediately people take sides, they dig in their heels, names are called, lines are drawn, right? Absolutely. But when you're reading in a book, and especially if it's something that isn't current, then you can kind of open your mind a little, and you can allow yourself to explore, well, what does racism look like?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's very deeply ingrained in the fabric of Indian society, racism.
yeah.
I honestly believe, and people think I'm crazy when I say this, that I think Indians from India, within India, are more racist than anything I see here in America.
Yeah.
And racist against the other Indian community.
Right. Right. And that's something that I've told people too, is
Mhm.
people have been racist from the beginning of time.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
flavor has changed. Who it is in any given community at any given time, who it is that's on the outs when we're on the ins, it changes,
Absolutely.
but it
Absolutely.
still exists. Because I've had people say to me, wow, this book is, I mean, it's just like today. And it's like, yeah, I know 150 years have passed, but not a lot has changed.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, going back to sort of what you asked earlier, I have grown up in, I don't know, you call it modern India. I was born in 1970 and grew up in Mumbai, which was definitely urban India, modern India, the industrial capital. And there's been a lot of change since then, over the last, 50 years or so. However, I have grown up with hatred, racism, sexism, misogynistic values in the household. And I have been exposed to these, whether I liked it or not,
Right.
whether I wanted to rebel against it or not. And oftentimes, I just didn't have the opportunity, or it wouldn't lead anywhere. So for me, fiction and developing these themes and stories in fiction is more than an outlet. It's an outlet for me, but it's just so important that I convey these thoughts and ideas and realities of other people that I portray through fiction to the outside world.
Absolutely. So along that line, when someone puts the book down and they think, wow, which they're going to think, what else do you want them to walk away with? What do you hope they can learn from having read your words?
Well, I am, being from India, I'm obsessed, and I'm biased. Of course I am. And living in the US, there's a lot of interest in India and things Indian, but it really drives me crazy because, in a sense, it's so superficial. The food and the Bollywood and the outfits, nothing wrong with those. I love those. We all do. But we have so much more, so much more.
Right.
Our stories, our culture, our dysfunction, our comedy, everything is not an Indian wedding with an elephant and horses. And, it's like,
Right.
there's so much more to it. And I really want people to sort of at least ask the question. When people go to India and people are traveling now, it's the same old, they'll go to Delhi and Agra and look at the Taj Mahal. Nothing wrong with that. But why not take a trip to Amritsar, where there's a beautiful partition museum? It's on the border of Pakistan. There is an exchange of guards every evening between Lahore and Amritsar. It's a political insight into certainly historical India, but frankly, current India too.
Right.
And it just, wakes you up to a whole other experience of India. And that's what I want people to, if not experience, then at least ask about.
Right.
And I will share, Terry, that researching first and then writing this book, Vermilion Harvest, has led me down the rabbit hole on other historical fiction projects, or historical projects, which I think will be historical fiction, at least one of them. One of them, that particular one, having to do with America's very first and earliest South Asian immigrants, who were actually here, mostly men, but then a few of them had wives somehow. There's a whole backstory as to, why most of them were not allowed to bring their wives. Again, racism. But they were planning an armed revolution against the British Empire, headquartered right here and in San Francisco, from where I talk to you today.
Wow.
I didn't
That's
know
going to be That's going to be a good one. Do you have any idea when you're planning to get that out into the world?
Oh my gosh. I'm researching. I'm, like I mentioned, I'm just spending all my time in the libraries at this point. But I do want to get it out into the world. It's not going to take me 30 years and 10 years and 2 years.
Yeah, it's not going to be like the first one.
No.
We're going to get it sooner than that.
Yes, I might have to take your lead and go on a writer's retreat and just
that for me, that's always the best way to write. Is I have to get out of my own space where my life is constantly calling me. And when I go on a writer's retreat, it's me and my writing, and everyone knows I'm not home. I'm not answering your calls. I'm not doing anything else, and I do get a lot done when I go on a retreat. It's the best thing for me. I love my office, but boy, I can't get a thing done here.
I hear you.
So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have the opportunity to win not a digital, but a signed physical copy of Vermilion Harvest. And it's definitely something you'll want to do. So look up the post, tell me something you liked or loved, and you'll have that opportunity. So tell me, if someone wanted to talk with you about the history that you're finding, the things that you're writing, talk with you about the Indian history in general, how do they do that? How do they get up with you?
With me specifically, I'm very active on Instagram, mostly that one. I try and do TikTok, but then,
I know.
Yeah. But I'm very approachable, and I want to know what questions people have, what they want to know about, what they're thinking, because honestly, this informs my writing. And I honestly believe that much as, I'm creating these stories and have fallen in love with them myself, I want to write for readers and audiences. I say audiences because I write screenplays as well, and visual audience is a little bit different, but still, story is story. And I want to bring stories that readers and audiences and viewers want to immerse themselves into. So I do encourage everybody to reach out. You can reach me through my website. If you go there, you can fill out a form, reach me, that comes right to me, or through Instagram, where my handle is Reenita_storyteller. I'm the person with headphones who looks like me.
And guys, I will have all of that in the show notes so that you'll be able to reach right out. Reenita, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been wonderful. I enjoyed the book. Run right out and buy it, guys. It's definitely worth the read. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you. And I can't wait to hear what your readers think. And I'm excited to send out the signed copy to that lucky person.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.